Welcome to the current state of gaming panel, everyone. So how many of you game obsessively here? Good, because I'm the Obsessive Gamer, a YouTuber of 40k subscribers here today.
I go by Nightwind. I'm one of his editors and collaborators on a lot of his videos.
And I'm Alex. I help edit a lot of the videos.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about just the modern state of gaming. The bad, the good, especially the bad. You know what's coming. So going to the next panel here, there's several issues within gaming we have. One being the overinflation of budgets, which have led to, as some of you might have heard, a lot of firing in the industry of employees and for various reasons. We've got everything from bad monetization practices, DLC and all that crap. And of course, a lack of game preservation, in which case you get a game, you can't get it again because gone. Why? Just cause, which we'll get to all these points in just a moment. So let's start with the overinflation of the budgets. So what we got here is a list here of game budgets here. As we can see, stuff like Cyberpunk, for example, cost $300 million to make. Way more than, say, a big Hollywood movie. A Marvel movie doesn't even cost that much sometimes. Maybe an Avengers movie, but that's about it. Something like Halo 4, it costs $100. And as you can see, games, it just keeps going higher and higher as time goes on, because that's the state of the industry due to the fact that they have to hire all these artists, big teams to work on it. So as a result, not many of these make their money back. As you can see, a lot of these did not make their money back. Even the recent Final Fantasy 16 didn't make their money back. Halo Infinite did terribly. And of course, the Suicide Squad game left $200 million down the hole. So the question becomes, why is this happening here? A lot of this is more of a Western industry problem that we're having right now, whereby the studios grow bigger, studios want to be able to expand further and make bigger games, and in hopes of trying to match these Hollywood-esque projections. And therefore, what you have here is games not making their money back, because, well, the quality sometimes doesn't match up, it turns into a bad gamble, and a lot of times it leads to mass layoffs, as can be seen here. A lot of these are Microsoft-based, as you can tell, too. Yes.
And doubling up on the whole Hollywood thing, a lot of the AAA games are getting Hollywood actors, which, of course, they're going to want their Hollywood pay rates. And that brings up the budgets quite a lot.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, audience participation is allowed in this one, so if you guys ever want to add anything, you can. On the flip side, you have games that did have as much of a budget that do very well. In this case, like Breath of the Wild, they would only needed to sell only $2 million because it didn't really cost that much to make. But yet, it became one of the best-selling Nintendo games yet, as you can see there, selling a whopping $32 million on the Switch alone. So that's the thing. A lot of Japanese developers don't try to reach for a Hollywood-esque budget there, and therefore, a lot of them have been staying okay, except unless you're Square Enix.
Speaking of Square Enix, we got a question from Barrett here.
Can you explain about the reason for not getting the money back, right now for FF16?
So FF16 sold well. This is not a question, but there's a few issues. Right now, it came out when the PS5 is still somewhat of a fresh console. Okay, it's not really a fresh console, but considering the fact that a lot of people couldn't get the PS5 for such a long time, a lot of people didn't have it, and they made it on a budget that, well, it needed a lot more of a user base to sell on. Also, it was exclusive to the PS5. If it came out of launch on the Xbox Series X and on PC, it might have done it right away. And this is all because, well, it's just such a high budget to make these high quality games, because they need these big artists, these major voice actors, union actors specifically, and just large teams to program everything that there needs to be here.
But with 16 now coming out to Steam very soon, hopefully the money will be made back and then some.
Getting back to the gaming budget talk, one of the things that I've noticed, I'm not as big into Nintendo, but Nintendo does tend to focus on what their audience wants. It tends to basically look at their audience and see what they're into, and then go with that.
Question?
Just to point out what you just said, not only Nintendo does look at what their audience want, they also look at who's not currently their audience and try to make it their audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which has led them, for example, to look into even series that are not so alive and try to make an audience out of them. I mean, games they banked on that have grown, for example, are like the Fire Emblem series. It was quite a niche series, but they just kept going with it bit by bit, and it just grew and grew and grew. And to the point, well, it makes a lot of money off their gacha right now for it.
I also think they have a lot more innovation. If you play games like, say, Call of Duty, there's tends to be a lack of innovation.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You have a lot of games that are coming out right now that are just sequels or remakes and sequels. And basically the lack of originality, and people are kind of tired of playing the same thing over and over as well. So people will just check out from wanting to buy a lot of these. Therefore, a lot of the reason why the sales don't happen. When they see a Final Fantasy 16, they're like, well, do I have to play the first 15? I hear that so many times. Yeah, despite the fact that that's not necessary usually. Lack of originality is part of it, and the fact that the budgets are just so high, they just don't make their money back so very easily as a result. So here's 2 examples of games that just released. Yeah. So you had Wukong, a game that only cost $42 million to make. It sold fantastically. China especially bought it up since it's a Chinese game. Meanwhile, a game like Concord, 8 years in development, at an estimate of 50 to 150 million to make. It did not do well at all. In fact, right now, my viewership and subscribership on YouTube are doing better than that game.
Yeah, it's true. Last I saw, at least on Steam charts, Concord's only got like 800 at most concurrent players, while Black Myth has had 2 million.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Now it can be considered per se an original game, but at the same time, when the average person might look at it, they might think, well, isn't this just Overwatch but worse?
It could also come down to faith in the companies that make them. There's a lot of the time now where games I feel aren't even beta tested when they come out, Cyberpunk being one of those examples. So I think a lot of the time people probably go with what their gut tells them about reliability.
Yeah, and we got a question here.
I personally feel like it's a little unfair to judge Cyberpunk that way, given they only released it early because the player base demanded it.
That's fair.
Violently, like incessantly. They have come a long way since.
Yeah, that's fair, but I just remember a lot of people saying, oh, I booked off time off of work to play the game, and then they moved the release date,
Yeah,
and they're saying,
yeah.
I can't book off time again. That's the type of thing.
CD Projekt Red kept telling players that it wasn't ready yet.
Absolutely.
More time, but the
Yeah.
player base just didn't care, and
Absolutely.
basically CD just said, sure, if you want it, here, have it, we warned you.
That's
Yeah.
fair, yeah.
Yeah, this is why there's that Miyamoto quote about a good game will get better eventually, but a bad game is bad forever. Yeah, and that's why you don't listen to your audience so easily. Yeah, take it when you need it, and for a good game to come out right away. So this question next.
To your point on the originality of the games and of what's coming out, how much of that would you say is from us not committing or not wanting new original things versus gravitating towards the same old franchises that we as consumers have always enjoyed, despite those new sequels or reboots or prequels just being very bad?
That's a very good question. I feel it's a mix of both. In many ways, one, companies want to make money, and well, and therefore, when they see people just seeing something familiar, and it'll sell if they bring it out. Say they make a new Resident Evil game, it'll do well. But say if Capcom decides to make finally, after all these years, a new Dino Crisis, well, that's not going to do as well. Despite the fact that there's a lot of similarities, I would say, and familiarity between both games to the classic player, both franchises. So therefore, because the fact that people are familiar with these and they'll likely sell, the originality kind of dies when the company just plays it safe. I mean, an example of this would be, say, Pokemon. It will sell no matter what. It can be the biggest piece of crap you can make that's the buggy as hell, and it will sell. I actually like Violet and Scarlet, in case you're wondering. Yeah, basically, that's the thing. Sometimes it's just the safest bet. But at the same time, for the long-term effects, which we're seeing now with layoffs and stuff, it will hurt a company eventually down the road. Question?
Yeah, I feel like we're dancing around a bit, but it's really just corporate mishandling and misunderstanding of why these budgets keep being inflated so big. They just throw money in it. It's hyper realistic as the graphics can get, because that's what people want more than anything. But say, like sometimes Nintendo looks at it and says, we're not going to get into this arms race of graphics. Instead, we're going to say, this looks good, and so we'll keep doing this for selling things most of the time. Of course,
Absolutely.
But when it comes to overinflating budgets, rushing and saying, release this game right now, or else in the case of Cyberpunk, it's usually executives who don't really understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And not listening to people like developers who are like, hold on, like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as a result, in a controlled environment, it will be a balance. You'll give your audience what you want, but you will also think of the future and be planning for what should come out and keep both new and old going forward, as it should be. And this is not just limited to gaming. A lot of industries are like going through a similar problem. Films and stuff too, but that's an argument for another time. Yes.
He was first here.
He was first? Yeah, okay.
But I think it's also due to the pandemic. You had a lot of market growth in it, and so the companies hired more people, and then the market had a little crash, and so you laid off. And I think what's also important is you have all the quarterly numbers that the managers and CEOs have to push. And for example, City Skylines 2 is the exact example. PDX had Lamplighter Sleep, which was basically non-existent in earnings, and so they had to push City Skylines 2 for the quarterly numbers. So it's just bad management.
Oh, well, also,
one last question for the next
oh, sorry.
One last question before the next slide. So
Okay. I also want to add that it's not also the executives, it's also the shareholders as well that doesn't really quite understand what the whole business they're investing in is. Sure, they can look at it a game as like, why is this game not selling as this game? But yet they're two completely different genres, so it might not really sell well. So a little bit of not understanding on both parts. They just think this should equal this.
yeah, with shareholders, I mean, it's why a lot of things have tanked. Ubisoft has tanked quite a bit just because of bad mishandling of various franchises overall, for example. But in the end, it's just a lot of these companies just making bad choices and just a lot of times not keeping that proper balance as mentioned earlier. So moving on to the next slide here. And yes, we gotta keep up with time because we only got 30 minutes left on this panel now. So let's talk about bad monetary practices here. Yes, you know, the thing everyone has suffered in some ways, I think, at this point. So yeah, the nickel and diming of gamers when at one point you could buy a game and plug it in and play. Not anymore, because, you know, you now have to pay to get, you know, a blue-colored character. Yeah, which of course comes in the forms of, say, loot boxes or just straight-up DLCs and various other methods. But moving on to the next slide here. And let's talk about loot boxes.
To add something to that. Sure. And this is a fair question, I believe. How do we stop that? Because if they're putting this out, people are buying. And also, as a software developer myself, I have to say, you need to switch like a lot from moving boxes to moving, you know, to have a constant revenue stream. And so, how do we stop the bad on this? And how do we make it fair so that we get more content, but also how do we educate people so that don't buy into this?
Well, that's a good question there. Well, with DLC and stuff, it's not a bad thing. These are not bad things per se. We've had these on PC in the 90s even as expansion packs and stuff. Thing is, if you make the base game, you sell it, but then sell additional material coming later on that will just expand upon the game, yeah, that's good. But say you sell the game, chop out maybe 75% of it, sell it as DLC, loot boxes, etc. Well, you're not being really good to the gamer there. So therefore, it's really a balance, once again, here, of and really you got to look after your audience. The fact you're giving them a proper good game, and they'll want to buy more of it to play in this case.
Well, it's also a form of gambling too, so I think some people get addicted to that. I used to
With
play
loot
an
boxes
MMO,
specifically.
yeah, called Star Trek Online, and every now and again they would have the Constitution 2 class Enterprise come up, and in order to get it, you would have to buy loot boxes and hope that when you opened it, you would get that ship. Unfortunately, it was very rare, but they would sell probably thousands, if not millions, worth of loot boxes.
Yeah, and with loot boxes, as some of you remember the Star Wars Battlefront 2 fiasco, where they locked a lot of the things you wanted in that game, like Darth Vader, behind loot boxes. Therefore, you kind of have to just spend until you finally can play as your favorite Sith Lord. They're right there. And then we, of course, game shit, and they reverse the decision. Of course, a lot of games still do that, like Overwatch does it, for example, for skins and whatnot. But, question.
Yeah, adding to that point about the loot boxes and everything like that, especially when you're separating the game and not giving you everything. NetherRealm Studios, for those that don't know, actually who does Mortal Kombat, they actually started doing that in the past few years as well. And they, you have the main story, they do that, but the thing is that right now they're introducing like these timed events, like, oh, you better do this now before this event goes away, like a big campaign, right? But then at the same time, because they also have an upcoming DLC coming up, the price of the DLC is actually, quite expensive for, in Canada, where you're going by like $40 to download that DLC, which is like a 4-hour campaign. But, to your point, like this is, I think a lot of from what I'm seeing, is like a lot of the Western gaming companies like them are now trying to follow that route.
And this is why I love modders and the guys who made Fallout London.
Yeah, it's not just a Western problem, just saying. A lot of the Eastern companies are doing it, especially the fighting game ones. Yeah. So Capcom, for example, do I have an example? No, I don't have.
It was previous slide.
Oh, previous slide. Let's go to the previous slide.
Okay.
Yeah. So over there's Fighter Pack 3. This is a stupidly high-priced one, as I remember, whereby, whereby each one I think was, what was it, $7 a character?
Basically, you have to buy a certain amount of coins. Okay, they're each like $5 a pack, but you can only buy with coins. And like the least amount you get is like a 400 type deal. It's like let's say it's a 7%. So you would have to buy more coins if you just want one costume. You need to buy more coins than what you want to buy, kind of like gift cards.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. These are outfits, not even full characters, for example. So yeah, remember at one point when fighting games, we used to be able to do all these challenges to just unlock a weapon, a costume, a color, which ArcSys games are very notorious for charging for colors in fighting games even. And so, yeah, that's the thing. A lot of these Japanese ones do this too now as well. So it's not just exclusive to Western ones as such.
At least we have now with some of the, not quite in-game unlocks now, but we have battle passes, season passes, where you can earn certain rewards by getting to certain levels on the pass. But then there's also ones that are still locked behind the paywall, which are often the better ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move on to So let's talk about gachas. So are gachas fair game for loot boxes? That's the bigger question. Put your hands up if you think it is a fair game for loot boxes.
No comment.
Okay, you guys are more people culture than expected.
Well, that's
You're all still rolling probably.
I think.
Oh.
I'm not sure if this is a popular opinion at all, but in the case of Genshin Impact, I would say it's completely fair, just because no matter if you get the gacha or not, all of the functionality of the game is still available to you. So it's not like not getting the 5-star character or the 4-star character that you want, and keeps you playing. It keeps you playing from any of the game.
I agree, and as a Genshin player myself, in this case, there are ones that are completely fair, where there's so much in-game stuff you could get that you can roll for what you want. Fire Emblem Heroes is another one that's like that. Of course, Genshin being like that. Nikkei is like that too, I would say. But then there's ones like Fate Go, which I'll leave this guy to talk about.
Fate Go, that's... the rates on that are pretty atrocious. I mean, they have been giving out enough gacha currency lately for stuff. I mean, I got one of the better characters recently from just the giveaways, but usually it's a lot of pretty much making you want to pay to get that character, make you feel like, oh, one more, but if I put in money, I could get it.
Just saying, I actually paid money for Get Ganyu and Genshin. I hate myself still to this day. Yeah. I think it's his hand up for a while there.
To add about like the gachas and loot boxes, I think they're generally like a very major problem because it's an issue where they're basically abusing kind of a flaw in like the human nature in a way that like some people are very affected by, and like they still make their money anyway. People are still going to buy it because of that.
Of course.
So I'm not sure how that can even be solved, honestly.
Well, of course, for as long as humans desire waifus, they'll do this.
I know I believe some countries in Europe have been pushing a legislation to ban loot boxes because it's a form of gambling, and because of how a lot of minors can have access to these games, that's a big problem if they associate with gambling.
A question over here.
There is, of course, the stuff with the gambling, but my biggest problem with it is that it's a way of artificially increasing playtime through just grinding for, like, mindless grinding, which is not fun for anybody.
Oh, yes. Which, this kind of goes back to what we were being told about timed events, for example. Because a game like Genshin Impact will have all these timed events, but that's the best place to get your primos. But it's a timed event, so you have like a few days to do this. Otherwise, well, you lose out on all those primos you could have gotten. Yeah.
No, I totally agree as well with that. I mean, some games do have like auto battle and auto clear options, so you could put your phone down and just do something else while you grind out the stuff. But other ones, like going back to Fake Go, you gotta do it all manually, and that's such a waste of time.
Question?
Yeah, my thing actually kind of ties into hers. I was going to say I think it's completely fair so long as you're able to somehow easily acquire the currency to be able to pull for the characters, the items, whatever it is. Like, locking the currency behind limited time events doesn't seem that fair. But like, if they gave it a more general open capacity to acquire said material, like Primogems to unlock characters in Genshin, it would be way more fair. And
yeah, I agree. I mean, a game I would say I've played it fair was Fire Emblem Heroes, because that game, well, it has some timed events there. They're not that major, important, or even huge. I mean, you still would get almost in all of your actual currency through various other methods throughout the game. So, yeah, I mean, but of course, not many gachas are that generous, because gachas make a stupid amount of money. Yeah, that's why Konami switched to just mobile games in general for the longest time, and that's why we never got a Metal Gear again. Anyways, one more question before the next slide.
In this scenario, I can see that some of those things that you get from gacha, I could actually use them for in-game play. But now I see that they're kind of evolving, especially because I wanted to corroborate with the new Pokemon trading card collection. They call it a game, even though you don't even play with the cards, you just have them there as images. And now they're calling it a game, so that's even evolving to the point where you don't even get to play with the things that you get in the gacha. And for me, basically, it's like buying NFTs.
Calling them NFTs is very accurate, in my opinion, from that description, definitely.
Yeah, of course, NFTs is still handled a little differently, because that has to be put into a whole system and everything. But that's a discussion for another time, because NFTs are kind of dying in general on what they were. Which, good job, everyone, on that. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about game preservation, or the lack thereof it. So, as some of you know, in games, a lot of times, there's usually a shop there. You can buy games, especially on console, and suddenly, the shop's not there anymore. You want to buy that Deadpool game? Too bad. The game was pulled for licensing reasons. Of course, a lot of times you could re-download it. Unless you got PT, the demo, that game is officially impossible to download legally. Yeah. Meanwhile, you have stuff like Nintendo. They make an eShop on the Wii. Got rid of that. Make a Wii U one. Could you get it again? No. You got to re-buy the games again. Okay. They make a 3DS one. Can you transfer the ones between Wii U and 3DS? No. Okay. You're buying Super Mario Bros. 3 again. and okay. Now you have a Switch one. Can you get all those again? No. You're starting over again. That's the thing, though. Your purchases are gone with Nintendo a lot of these times, and it's a pretty terrible practice there with game preservation, because a lot of these companies do not really care about how much they want to preserve the game, and rather, it's almost a license you get to play these until they're gone. And if your console bricks crashes, a lot of times you can't. Granted, some companies like Sony and stuff, even if their shop is down, there is still a way to get it, but some do not allow for it. And it's a licensing thing, that's not possible at all. But
Question about that, just in terms of digital, are we coming to the end of the physical copy? Is that on the horizon?
I feel it is eventually, and this is what I hate about it. I'm a guy who likes to collect games quite a bit, come to these conventions a lot for finding stuff like that, nice gems like that. And I somehow didn't see a single copy of Conker's Bad Fur Day today. I don't know why. Yeah, basically, because of the fact that it's cheaper to put them on the digital front stores, you don't need to have any manufacturing costs. You don't need to have anything made, sent, shipped. You can do that, and you can remove it anytime you want, because you can either resell it again in maybe 10 years later with prettier graphics, or just resolution update for $10 more. Like Skyward Sword was just resold. Well, that was the physical release, so I can't really comment about that. But it happens all the time with stuff like this. But question.
I was just going to add something.
You let him add something?
I was just going to say, I used to agree with the idea that physical was going to disappear, but now I'm actually not too sure. If you watch any of the retro game store channels on YouTube, they're doing very well. There seems to be a resurgence in popularity of the physical media, not just in gaming, but in movies especially. Comics, all that type of thing. So I don't know if I'm of two minds about it. I know that companies want to get rid of it because that means more money. But at the same time, I think a lot of people still want their physical media.
Yeah, and yes, it is possible it'll keep going on. But at the same time, we got to consider stuff like a lot of stores are getting rid of their gaming section. Yep. Best Buy, Walmart, it's kind of over there. You have GameStop still, but if you notice, that's more of a merch shop nowadays. Yeah, I know. And you're pretty much left with your indie gaming stores at this point, which have old games, new ones too. But that's the thing, though. Eventually, when less and less retailers sell it, a lot of these major companies will have less of an incentive, I feel.
Sasha, I think she had her hand up first.
Yes.
So I have, continuing what Elon left was saying, I don't think that physical media will ever fully leave, because for one, there's a massive resurgence of vinyl.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. People absolutely love that. But two, the collector's edition.
Yeah.
People love getting collector's edition. I sadly missed out on the Hollow Knight collector's edition for the Switch, but that was the only physical release of Hollow Knight.
Absolutely, yeah.
There is.
That was so cool.
There is also the idea of releasing a collector's edition, but then inside the box, after you remove your big Sonic statue, there's only a download code. I'm still scarred from Sonic Mania, just saying.
Yeah.
God, I hate that method. Question?
I think, actually, I'm also of the same mind that I don't think physical media will fully go away. Because as someone who still collects physical games and DVDs and other things today, I think there's a sense of ownership with it that that it's like, hey, this is mine. It'll be mine forever. Because the idea is that if you remember back in the day when Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was, people have that on PS2.
Yeah.
We still have it. I still got my copy. That's mine. But the thing is, prior to the collection being announced, for years, they released it on PS3, but only on a digital library for X amount of time. Then they took it down, and people couldn't find it anymore unless you go to a shop that was selling it for $200 or $300 worth of physical media. So what I'm saying is that I agree that yes, digital will become more prominent, but I don't think physical will go away because essentially, you're just downloading it from a library or something.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I hope this is going to be really the case, and it'll be like Blu-rays where they'll exist, but to a much smaller capacity. But that's my worry always, that maybe they'll just say screw it, they'll just go that way and just go about it there.
Yeah, for me, one thing that sort of brought me around is when they opened FYE in the Eaton Center. I was in shock. I'm like, oh wow, people are coming in and buying Blu-rays, they're buying DVDs, they're buying vinyls. Like, they're doing very, very well. So that sort of started to change my mind about things.
Yeah, I mean, there's limited run games and other game preservations. I don't like limited run games, by the way. Yeah, despite this. Don't like, not for the fact they make physical games. I love that shit, but it's just for a lot of other reasons. But yeah, like you obviously has a huge market and buyer base that come over and over to it, like myself. But yes, question.
One thing I want to ask about, assuming that game preservation issue gets eventually solved, isn't things becoming digital a good thing? Because the companies, like as you said, companies are preferring digital because they save up on manufacturing and things like that. But if companies save money, then they have more budget to put into game development.
Well, you aren't wrong if things worked well in how they handle their money. They don't. That's why you have firings happening. But yeah, in many ways, there's a lot of benefits to digital gaming itself, in the fact that, well, you can have everything in a tight little corner. You don't need to have shelf after shelf of games just lined up. And of course, if they save money, they can maybe use it for more game development. A lot of times, instead, they overinflate a game's budget, and well, they still lose money. Which, in other words, that's an industry problem that we're having in general. Of despite saving money, you still lose money.
Conversely, though, the interesting thing is your point could be switched around as well. Well, yes, you've saved the physical space for a lot of people that have to download the big games. You'll download a game that's like 50 to like 90 gigs, and then you'll have to download a 50 gig update on top of that. And if you have a 1 terabyte hard drive, like on an Xbox One or Series X, then you have to sort of really be careful on what you're playing and what you want to download. And then you have times, like the time that you have to take to download as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're just moving on here. Let's talk about...
I just want to add one more thing
One
on
more
that.
thing, okay.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we would be able to have full, digital libraries of every game from every, publisher has their own library and stuff. But unfortunately, server costs are a big thing with the companies, and when they see no one's downloading X game, they're just gonna yank it from the store and never be able to get it again unless it's a kind of anniversary release.
Which is where we come to our gotcha topic right here of end of service. You have all these gotcha games that are made, and they've maybe invested years of work on them, and then suddenly end of service. Why? Because, well, a lot of people aren't paying or even playing it really, and so to save server costs, well, they just get rid of the whole thing altogether. And therefore, what you have is, of course, a lot of games going down, especially when they cross over with Joker. Yeah, for some reason. Yeah. Never see it. Ironically, I'm cosplaying Joker today. But yeah, but that's the thing. A lot of games go out because of that. You have an end of service, and they don't offer really an offline version. The only game I know that did that was that Mega Man Gotcha. And this is the really problem. We have a lot of games that are lost to time, impossible to play because of that, because there's no way to grab the actual source code and make it offline playable because they take it off. And that's the major problem with when it comes to a true digital DRM experience there, that there's no way to play a lot of these games. That Love Live game, for example, it was years and years popular, gone. Dissidia, gone. And it just goes on and gone.
And one recent example that some of you may know of, The Crew, even taken from people's libraries. And now, thanks to that, there is some push for legislation to make offline versions for these games, so you can still play the single-player component.
Let's hope it passes. First, let's talk about the Nintendo problem first. So, as I mentioned, Nintendo likes to continuously pull their games off of these shops and never offer you another way to get these games that you paid for. And of course, in this case, when I lost the Wii, there was no way to get Doc Lewis's Punch-Out, which was literally a Club Nintendo reward, actually, which was an expansion upon Punch-Out. You didn't actually need a copy of Punch-Out to play that, but you had it. Games like Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, My Life as a King, gone. And for some reason, the Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, recently released on Switch, and it was a limited time to, download it, buy it, and now it's now unless you, other than finding it via other means there's no other ways to get it. So as a result, this is a big problem we have with Nintendo there. So what's the solution? Well, why don't we have a Nintendo Steam-like store for old games, I would say, whereby Nintendo just makes this PC kind of app where they put just their old games, maybe everything, maybe 2 generations before the current one, on there. You could download it, mod it, however you need to, source code and everything. Therefore, people will be getting that more rather than pirating their games as most people do when they want to play an old Nintendo game rather than pay $300 for a copy of Fire Emblem Path of Heroes.
Yeah.
Path of Radiance, sorry. Path of Radiance.
And this is one thing I actually really don't understand about Nintendo. If you look at their classic consoles that came out, people were scrambling to get them. There was resellers online that were upselling them and all of that. I just don't understand why Nintendo wouldn't see that interest in, pursue what you were saying.
Oh, yes. One question before we move to the next slide.
Taking the lack of physical media to an extreme, I've heard that both Xbox and PlayStation are considering moving towards virtual consoles in the future. Do you think, since there is such a demand clearly for physical media, that might open up a space in the console wars for new consoles, like physical consoles, to come in?
Well, by physical consoles, do you mean like actual buying a disc or?
With new consoles you could actually buy instead of Microsoft and Sony just moving to virtual machines.
I know with the latest build of the PlayStation 5, Sony's been testing the waters with having a detachable disc drive where you could get the digital version and then down the road get the disc attachment for, I think it's like $80 or something, so you can put the discs in. So that might be what may be seen with PlayStation 6 as an option.
Yeah.
Just the one base model, and you could buy a disc unit separate for physical games.
Mm-hmm. So we've got 5 minutes in the panel, so we're going to just jump ahead to the next one here. Let's talk about just some of these upcoming games here right now. So right now we have, these are the ones coming out within the rest of the year here. A lot of major titles here, a lot of sequels and remakes and whatnot, as we can tell here, which some are pretty looking forward to here. Unfortunately, none were playable here at this convention. I was kind of hoping to play something of these, none at all today. I want to talk more about these, but we're so lacking on time. Let's pop on to the next one here. Switch 2. This is not what it's going to look like.
That'd be pretty ugly if it was the case.
Yeah. So the expectations for this is probably at this point, I think, end of 2025. I think because we're not even seeing any type of showcase or anything for it yet, which I think by this point, originally, the Switch was at least being shown off in some ways back then. But yet, nothing here. But yet, if we go to the next slide here, there are 2 games some people believe could be cross-platform with the Switch 2. Yeah, which we get Metroid Prime 4, if we know a game ever comes out, is expected to be cross-platform. And even Pokemon Legends ZA, just because of the release window that some people are expecting of late 2025, maybe even early 2025 there. But yeah, right now, while we don't know too much about that, these are some games to look forward to on that. However, when we go to the next generation, well, don't expect it anytime soon at this point. Maybe a remodeling, maybe we'll get a PS5 Pro, maybe we'll get a portable Xbox probably. Maybe an actual portable PS5. But I think that comes to the last point here, portability, whereby because the popular the Steam Deck, as I mentioned, and which is also thanks to the Switch's success, I think the following generations will go for more of a portable and home console hybrid as they did here. And I think that's what we can expect for the next generation. One last question to answer here.
I saw that at the beginning of the presentation you had like the budgeting for video games, and sometimes that some of them have even like less people subscribed or playing the game even though they're new. I saw that the upcoming games that you're looking forward to see are well-established franchises.
Mm-hmm.
But is there any game that has been attracting you that it's like brand new that you haven't seen, to see like what would a game look like to attract new gamers or new franchises to bring more players to their game? Like something that will be like brand new. What should any developer or game creator or company should be doing to attract gamers and don't have like a failure like the one that we're seeing right now with Conquer?
Well, realistically, it's a good idea to look towards games that have done well in the past, and but also do go with more original ideas as well, rather than just copy and paste from old ideas. Conqueror's idea problem is a lot of times it looks like an Overwatch clone to a lot of people. It doesn't really look original, which of course Overwatch itself is already influenced from, say, Team Fortress, and therefore it's almost like a copy of a copy of a copy. Yeah. And therefore, that's the thing. Because of our lack of originality, and just it tends to have a much appeal, and therefore you don't really see much coming out there that's original. One thing I'd really like to list earlier was that Zelda game, for example, because when you play Zelda, there's a new gameplay for the Zelda game, and that's one thing I'm looking for. Despite not being an original IP, there's a lot of originality with it. So even existing IPs can still revolutionize or change ideas, and therefore, that's I say what they should do. Go for more originality in this industry.
Yeah, I just was going to add on to that. I think the best thing that you can do, and I'll give it as an example, RoboCop Rogue City. What you want to do is you want to target the traditional fans, number one. You want to bring in all the old nostalgic content, and then you want to add new content in. That way, you can also have a generational change. You can have parents that bring their kids into it as well. You just want to treasure the old fans and bring in new content for the new fans.
Well, now we're pretty much out of time. So
I just want to do one more thing on that.
One last
one last thing. 'Cause I was trying to get this in before.
Yeah. Okay.
For original IPs, I noticed one thing that helps with its success is either have somebody famous backing it or heavily involved in it. One example, Death Stranding, very original idea. Any other developer would have probably had the game fail completely, but with Kojima's name behind it, definitely helped push it to success.
That was a banger. Play it. Play it now, guys. All right, go to the last panel here. That's the end of the panel here. Thank you for attending this panel here. I'm the Obsessive Gamer. I have 40K on YouTube. Come check it out. My link's here. And this is Nightwind with his YouTube channel. Definitely check him out too. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your con.